Imana. I'm 23, living with my parents, and in the final stretch of college. You'd think life right now would be simple: study, pass my exams, graduate. But no. Simple isn't in the cards for me. And the reason? My older sister, Jessica. Jessica is 30, married, and owns a house across town. You'd assume that means she handles her own responsibilities, especially as a mom. But in my family, responsibility is something you pass off to the most convenient person. And for Jessica, that person has always been me. For the past 5 years, I've been her on-call babysitter. Not because I volunteered, but because saying no never seemed to be an option. It all started when I was just a college freshman. One afternoon, Jessica showed up at our house, hair slightly disheveled, arms full, 2 tiny babies in one, a diaper bag in the other, looking like she was about to collapse. Her voice was rushed, desperate. "Hannah, I have an important meeting. Just for an hour, please." They were so little, barely a few months old. I figured, how hard could it be? So I said yes. 1 hour turned into 2, then 3, then 4. The sun dipped below the horizon, and I was still stuck in an endless loop of diaper changes, bottle feedings, and soothing 2 inconsolable infants. When Jessica finally walked through the door, she wasn't frazzled from a long meeting. She wasn't juggling work papers or stressed out over deadlines. She was holding shopping bags. "Thanks so much," she chirped, flashing me a guilty smile. "You're a natural with them." And that was it. The beginning of a cycle I wouldn't escape for years. First it was just here and there. A couple of hours while she ran errands. Then half a day. Then full weekends. I tried to set boundaries. "Jessica, I have midterms. I really need to study." She barely paused, already setting up the twins' things. "Don't be so dramatic," she scoffed. "They mostly sleep anyway. You can study while they nap." Anyone who's ever been around babies knows that's a lie. Between diaper changes, feeding schedules, and 2 sets of tiny hands constantly reaching for anything they shouldn't, studying was impossible. Sleep? A luxury. My friends? A fading memory. One weekend, after she dropped them off for the 3rd time in a row, I reached my breaking point. "Jessica, I haven't seen my friends in weeks." She barely glanced at me. "You'll be fine. They love spending time with you." "Sure. But at what cost?" Now, as I count down the days to graduation, I can't help but wonder, will this ever stop? Or will I still be babysitting these kids when I'm 30? I needed time for myself. "Jessica, I need a break too." She barely looked up, already reaching for her purse. "What do you mean? You have plenty of free time. The babies don't take up that much of it." And then, as always, she threw out the one line that made everything feel like it wasn't even a choice. "Besides, isn't this what sisters are for?" That became her favorite excuse. And somehow I was always the one paying the price. For Jessica, family was everything. For me, family meant missing out. While my classmates were at parties making memories, living their lives, I was babysitting. I learned how to write essays with one hand while rocking a crying baby with the other. The twins grew from tiny, helpless newborns into energetic toddlers. But Jessica's expectations? They never changed. If anything, they only got bigger. "They're so much easier now," Jessica would say. "They can walk, talk. It's basically like having little friends over." Except 5-year-olds still needed constant supervision. They still climbed bookshelves, scribbled on walls, and found ways to create chaos in mere seconds. Watching them was never as effortless as Jessica made it sound. But finally, after 4 exhausting years of juggling school and babysitting, I was free. Graduation day came and went, and for the first time in forever, my life felt like it was mine again. That evening, I met my friends at our favorite cafe. The same place where we'd spent late nights cramming for exams, venting about professors, and dreaming about life after college. "So, what's next for everyone?" Natalie asked, stirring her latte. "We're all heading in different directions soon," Jenna chimed in. "But before that, we should do something. One last adventure." The table fell quiet for a beat, then without thinking I said, "What about France?" The reaction was instant. It was like lighting a match in dry grass. Excited voices overlapped. Phones came out. Flights were checked. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't in so long: excitement. Not for Jessica. Not for babysitting. For me. And the best part? I could actually afford it. My grandmother had given me $10,000 as a graduation gift. Now I wasn't just dreaming about traveling, I was making it happen. Look at these flight prices. Isabella gasped. If we book now, we can get amazing deals. We spent the next few hours mapping everything out: flights, hotels, sightseeing. By the time we left the cafe, it was real. The trip was set. Just a few weeks away, and I'd finally be stepping onto a plane, heading to a place I'd only ever imagined. That evening when I got home, I found out my parents had invited Jessica and her family over for dinner. Perfect. I was dying to share my news. As we ate, I smiled and casually dropped the bomb. We're going to France. Jessica's fork clattered onto her plate. Her head snapped up. When? Second week of July, I said, taking another bite of lasagna. We got amazing deals on the tickets. Her face flushed red. The second week of July? Are you kidding me? I blinked, confused. What's wrong with July? Her jaw clenched. That's when Matt and I are going on our trip. You knew that. You did this on purpose. I frowned. What? No, I didn't. Don't lie. Her voice sharpened. You absolutely planned this just so you wouldn't have to watch the twins. I put my fork down. My appetite was gone. Jessica, I didn't know about your trip. We just planned this today. She folded her arms. Well, you need to cancel it. Silence. Excuse me. You can go to France anytime, she said firmly. But we've already booked everything for our trip, and we need you to watch the kids. A slow, cold anger curled in my stomach. I can't cancel. I kept my voice calm. We already paid for our tickets and hotels. Besides, this is my only chance to travel with my friends before everyone moves away. Jessica rolled her eyes. Don't be ridiculous. Your friends will still be here. My trip is more important. I haven't had a vacation in years. You need to stay and babysit. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to meet her gaze. I'm not changing my plans, Jessica. Everything is booked and I'm going. She slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware rattle. And what am I supposed to do with the twins? Have you even thought about that? I opened my mouth, but she cut me off. Mom and Dad are too busy, she said quickly. Mom's working overtime and Dad's still recovering. You know that.
Ich zerrte her.
My heart pounded. I knew what she was doing. She was counting on me to fold, to back down like I always did. But not this time. This time I was choosing me. For the first time in years I chose myself. Dad barely touched his food, quietly pushing it around his plate. He looked exhausted. He had been for a while. But I wasn't going to let Jessica use that against me. I knew exactly what she was doing. Twisting the situation, making herself the victim like always. I kept my voice steady. There's an easy solution. Hire a babysitter. Jessica let out a sharp, mocking laugh. A babysitter? I don't trust strangers with my kids. She scoffed, shaking her head. Besides, Matt and I are saving up for a house. We can't waste money on a babysitter when you're perfectly capable of watching them. I folded my arms. If you can afford a vacation, you can afford a babysitter. Her expression darkened. That's different, she snapped. This trip is important for our marriage. Matt and I need time together. Then, just like always, her voice softened, sliding into that familiar manipulative guilt trip. Hannah, there's no problem here. You just need to stay with the twins like you always do. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. Something inside me snapped. I exhaled sharply and stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. You know what? I'm done arguing about this. My voice was firm, unwavering. I've made my decision. I'm going to France. Jessica's face twisted in disbelief. Hannah, no. I shook my head. 4 years I've dropped everything for you. I've missed parties, study groups, and time with my friends because you needed a babysitter. Not anymore. You're not guilt-tripping me out of this trip. Jessica's lips curled in frustration. This isn't about guilt. This is about family responsibility. My blood boiled. And what about your responsibility as a parent? I shot back, my voice rising. It is not my job to provide free childcare every time you want it. If you need someone to watch the twins, hire a babysitter. I inhaled deeply, meeting her glare head-on. I'm going to France with my friends. And that's final. Jessica's face turned beet red. Her mouth opened, probably to throw another demand my way, but I didn't wait to hear it. I walked away, my heart pounding. For too long, I let her control my life through guilt and obligation. But not this time. The calm before the storm. The next 2 weeks were eerily quiet. Mom and Dad stayed out of it, mumbling that Jessica and I needed to work things out ourselves. And Jessica? Nothing. No calls. No texts. No surprise visits with the twins. It should have felt like peace. Instead, it felt like waiting. Like standing on the shore watching the waves pull back, knowing a storm was coming. I threw myself into packing, trying to ignore the anxiety curling in my stomach. I had my suitcase ready, my itinerary printed, my excitement building. Just one more day, and I'd finally be on my way to France. The day before my flight, I was going through my final checklist when I realized I had forgotten a few things. I'm running to the store. I called out to Mom, grabbing my car keys. Just need to pick up some last-minute stuff for tomorrow. I was gone maybe an hour. Navigating through crowded aisles, checking my list, picturing myself on the streets of Paris. When I stepped back through the front door, I knew something was wrong. The air in the house felt off. Too quiet. But beneath that silence, I heard something faint, soft giggles coming from the living room. My stomach twisted. I knew those giggles. Connor and Caleb. Jessica's twins. But why? Jessica hadn't brought them over in 2 weeks. Dread clawed up my spine as I rushed into the living room. And then I froze. There, sitting cross-legged on the floor, were my nephews. In their tiny hands was my passport. No, no, no. My breath caught in my throat as I lunged forward, snatching it from them. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, whispering, "Please be okay. Please be okay." But it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. I flipped it open and my stomach dropped. Where my photo should have been, there was only a ragged hole, the edges uneven, scissors. My visa stamps? Ruined. Every page was covered in chaotic scribbles of red, blue, green, and purple. Markers. My passport was destroyed. A strangled sound tore from my throat, somewhere between a sob and a scream. No, no, no. All the planning. The excitement. The freedom I had finally chosen for myself gone. Tears blurred my vision as I clutched the ruined pages to my chest, rocking slightly, my breath sharp and uneven. No, no, no. My voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper at first. Then louder. And louder. Until it filled the house. I screamed. The kind of scream that shakes walls. The kind that comes from years of being pushed aside, used, taken for granted. Footsteps rushed toward me. Mom. Dad. Jessica. I barely registered them as they burst into the room, alarmed by my outburst. I held up the ruined passport, my hands trembling so violently I could barely keep my grip. Look at what they did. My voice cracked between sobs. Look at it. Jessica's gaze flicked to the torn pages in my hands. No shock.
No guilt. No apology.
Instead, she crossed her arms and sighed. Hannah, you really need to be more careful with your important things, she said, bored, condescending. Like I had just spilled a glass of milk. I blinked, stunned. Was she serious? Jessica clicked her tongue and shook her head like she was scolding a child. How many times have I told you not to leave your stuff lying around where the kids can get it? Lying around? Lying around. She turned to our parents, her voice suddenly calm, reasonable, as if she were explaining the weather. You know how careless Hannah can be. She probably left it out on the bed or something. The twins are just curious. They found it and wanted to play. A sharp electric snap went through me. Are you kidding me? I shot up from the couch, my entire body shaking with rage. That's impossible. Jessica barely reacted, lazily raising an eyebrow. I never leave my things out, especially when the twins are here. I learned that lesson after 5 years of being your unpaid babysitter. My voice rose, my hands gripping the ruined passport so tight my knuckles turned white. Jessica tilted her head, pretending to be confused. Well, clearly, you didn't learn it well enough. Oh, that was rich. If I'm so careless, I snapped, my voice sharp enough to cut through the tension in the room. Then why do you always leave your kids with me? Why trust such an irresponsible person with your precious twins? Mom and Dad stood frozen, their eyes darting between us like they were watching a tennis match. Mom looked worried. Dad's hands clenched at his sides. They had never seen me this angry before. And I wasn't done. I took a deep, shaking breath, my anger burning hot under my skin. My passport, I said, my voice dropping, turning cold, was inside my suitcase. Jessica blinked. Inside a locked suitcase. Her lips parted slightly. In a zipped security pocket. Flicker just for a second. A flash of something in her eyes. Fear. Then just as quickly she smothered it. She shrugged, folding her arms across her chest, slipping back into that tone. That oh-so-sweet, manipulative, fake innocence. I don't know how it happened, she said smoothly, her words carefully chosen. Kids can be very resourceful when they want to be. But there's no point in placing blame here. The fact is, you clearly weren't careful enough with your documents. I felt sick. She wasn't going to admit it. She wasn't going to take responsibility. Instead, she did what she always did. She blamed me. She folded her arms and shrugged. The twins are 5, Hannah, she said, voice still mockingly calm. They can't be held responsible for this. You're the adult here. This is your fault. It was like a punch to the stomach. I had given her years of my life. Years of changing my plans. Years of missing out on friendships, on experiences, on living. And this was how she repaid me. Then, as if to twist the knife, Jessica turned to our parents, putting on her best sympathetic voice. She sighed dramatically. Well, since Hannah won't be able to go on her trip now, she can just stay home and watch the twins while Matt and I go on our vacation. It actually works out perfectly. Then she smiled. That smug, sweet, sickly smile she always wore when she was dumping her responsibilities on me. The room started spinning. My breath hitched in my throat. I felt my legs give out beneath me as I collapsed onto the couch, violent sobs shaking my body. Through my tears, through the overwhelming betrayal, a horrifying realization crept into my mind. She thought she had one. Dad's voice was razor-sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. Your mother and I have bent over backward to support you. And Hannah? She has sacrificed her entire college experience to be your personal babysitter. Jessica's lips trembled. I just needed. Dad let out a bitter laugh. Cold. Hollow. You just needed. He shook his head in disgust. You've crossed every line there is to cross. Then his voice dropped lower. Steady. Deadly. That agreement we had about helping you buy a house? Consider it cancelled. Jessica's face drained of color. What? No. Dad, please. Her voice cracked, desperation creeping in. Dad didn't even blink. That $400,000, he continued, eyes burning with anger. It's not going to you anymore. I'm giving it to Hannah instead. She can use it to buy her own apartment, far away from your manipulation and control. Jessica let out a strangled sob. Tears spilled down her cheeks, black mascara streaks running like ink on paper. She turned to Mom, desperate for backup. But Mom just shook her head. Her voice was quiet, yet filled with a deep, crushing disappointment. I'm so disappointed in you, Jessica. I never thought you'd do something like this. She exhaled slowly, as if seeing her daughter for the first time. I don't even recognize the person you've become. Silence. Thick. Heavy. The only thing left was the shattered remains of everything Jessica thought she could get away with. And my passport, still lying on the coffee table. A stark reminder of what I had lost. My dream trip? Gone. At least for now. My phone buzzed. I barely had the energy to check it, but when I saw the name flashing on the screen, Natalie, I answered. Hannah. Her voice was gentle, cautious. What happened? The moment I started explaining, my throat closed up with emotion. By the time I finished, I was struggling to hold back fresh tears. But this time they weren't sad ones. Because Natalie didn't hesitate. Then we'll reschedule, she said simply. I blinked. What? We'll wait, she repeated. It'll take a couple of months to get a new passport? No big deal. And then through the speaker I heard them. My friends. All of us will wait. Jenna's voice came through the group chat. France has been there for thousands of years. It can wait a little longer. Isabella was already typing. Most airlines and hotels have flexible policies. We might lose a small fee, but it's worth it to go together. I pressed a hand over my mouth, overcome with emotion. For years I had been expected to sacrifice, to put others first, to let my dreams shrink in favor of someone else's. But now I had people who weren't willing to let me lose this. People who didn't see me as an obligation. People who chose me. This was real family. And that was worth more than any vacation. Months later I stood at the airport, ticket in hand, a brand new passport tucked safely in my bag. This time nothing could stop me. No guilt.
No manipulation.
No last-minute sabotage. I still can't believe we're actually here, Natalie said as we boarded. I squeezed her hand, overwhelmed with gratitude. Me neither. And then as the plane lifted off, I closed my eyes and let it all sink in. I was free. And the wait had been worth it. France was everything I had dreamed of. And more. We wandered through the ancient streets of Paris, laughing as we got lost in the winding alleys. We stood beneath the Eiffel Tower at night, watching it sparkle against the dark sky. In Rouen we marveled at paintings in the Musée des Beaux-Arts, taking in breathtaking art before climbing to the top of the Cathedral Notre Dame, where the city stretched beneath us like something out of a storybook. And Lyon was pure magic. Especially at sunset, when the golden light hit the canals just right, turning the whole city into something out of a dream. One afternoon as we sat by the Seine, gelato in hand, Jenna took a bite and let out a sigh. "See," she said, nudging me. "Told you it was worth the wait." I smiled, feeling the warm summer air, the laughter of my friends, the weight of everything I had left behind. She was right. It was worth the wait. And this was just the beginning. Isabella laughed, scrolling through the photos on her phone. "These are going to make the best Christmas cards." I grinned, watching as she flipped through snapshots of us standing under the Eiffel Tower, sipping coffee at a tiny Parisian cafe, and laughing on the cobblestone streets of Lyon. But the best part of this trip? It wasn't just the sightseeing. It was the freedom. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't have to check my phone for frantic messages from Jessica. No sudden babysitting emergencies. No guilt trips. No manipulation. Just me, my friends, and the adventure we had chosen. And for the first time in my life I was in control. Back home, everything had changed. The house was quieter now. No twins running through the halls, knocking over furniture. No Jessica showing up unannounced, demanding favors. And the strangest part? It was peaceful. Dad had already started transferring the house money to my name instead of Jessica's. One morning as I sat across from Mom at the kitchen table sipping coffee, I told her about an apartment I'd found. A perfect 2-bedroom in the city. "It's exactly what I need to start my new job," I said, barely able to contain my excitement. Mom smiled, looking more relaxed than I had seen her in years. "Your father and I are so proud of you, sweetheart. You handled everything with such grace." I wasn't sure about grace, but I had handled it. And that was enough. As for Jessica, she hadn't been back to the house since the passport incident. Mom still called her sometimes, keeping the door open but distant. From what I gathered, Jessica had quit her job to stay home with the twins. But we all knew the truth. She hadn't chosen to stay home. She just couldn't find free childcare anymore. Choosing my own life one afternoon, as Mom and I sat by the window, watching the trees sway in the autumn breeze, she sighed and set down her cup. "She's learning to be a real mother," she said, almost to herself. "It's about time." Dad, however, had no sympathy. "Actions have consequences," he reminded her every time Jessica's name came up. "She's an adult. She made a choice to hurt her sister. I'm not going to reward that behavior." The twins still asked about me sometimes. Mom would mention it in passing, relaying bits and pieces from her phone calls with Jessica. "They miss you." And I missed them too. But I knew that keeping my distance was the right thing to do for now. Maybe one day, when they were older, we could have a relationship that wasn't controlled by their mother's manipulation. Until then, I had a different relationship to focus on. The one with myself. A new beginning. The trip to France had given me more than just memories. It had shown me who I was when I stopped letting other people dictate my choices. My new apartment? It wasn't just a place to live. It was a fresh start. A space that was truly mine. No one could show up unannounced. No one could expect favors. No one could make me feel like I owed them my time. For the first time, I was living for me. One evening during our weekly dinner meetup, I leaned back in my chair, watching my friends laugh and argue over who got the last piece of bread. You know what the best part is? I asked. They looked up curious. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm actually living my own life, I said, smiling. Not just playing a background role in Jessica's. They clinked their glasses in agreement. And in that moment I knew I had finally stepped out of my sister's shadow. Was there guilt? Of course. Sometimes I thought about the rift in my family. Dad's harsh stance. The twins growing up without their aunt. But then I remembered my destroyed passport. I remembered Jessica's cold, calculated smirk as she tried to trap me one last time. And I knew I had made the right choice. Jessica may have lost a babysitter, but I had gained something far more valuable. My freedom.